Hello, I'm Diana Kelman. I'm a director and co-founder along with Alistair Kelman of SafeCast. We decided to make this video to explain how our technology and patents could protect children from seeing inappropriate content on both the internet and on television, but without censorship. Our starting point was looking at how our parents and grandparents protected their children from seeing inappropriate content on television without censorship. When commercial television began broadcasting in the UK in 1955, almost everything within it was live except for the advertisements. Anything recorded was viewed in advance of broadcasting it by television executives, who were able to say whether a programme or advertisement should be shown during the daytime, when children were likely to be viewing it. Building on the practices developed by the Independent Broadcasting Authority, in those days, few parents in the UK were concerned about what their children saw on daytime television. This was because everything was pre-reviewed and classified by television executives in their viewing rooms before it was actually broadcast. Additionally, sometimes producers on the floor inside the TV studios would actually regulate what was being broadcast. Before the days of video recorders, the TV watersheds protected children from seeing inappropriate content, since the more adult programmes were broadcast when children were asleep. The Independent Broadcasting Authority, or IBA as it was known, required that adult themes in programmes were only shown at times when children were not likely to be watching television. Nowadays, children watch more video on tablets and phones than they do on television. So how can we ensure that children remain protected from harmful material in the internet age, when most viewing by children comes not from regulated television, but from the internet? And how can we do so without censorship and undermining fundamental freedoms? Our solution is through the use of labelling. In a similar way to movies, where every film is given an audience classification, all video on television and the internet can be given a label, which indicates whether it contains any sex, violence, horror, or is in some other way unsuitable for showing to children below a particular age and maturity. Building on a paper we submitted about 18 months ago to the DCMS, we have shown how it is perfectly possible to classify and label all video using just 6 codes. In 1947, John von Neumann, the famously gifted Hungarian mathematician, was the keynote speaker at the first annual meeting of the Association for Computing Machinery. In his address, he said that future computers would get along with just a dozen instruction types, a number known to be adequate for expressing all of mathematics. He went on to say that one need not be surprised at this small number, since 1,000 words were known to be adequate for most situations in real life, and mathematics was only a small part of life, and a simple part at that. Classification of videos using a few codes is effectively what the IBA and its successor regulators, the ITC and Ofcom, have been doing for the past 62 years. So we based our metadata labelling system on existing tried and tested principles. In our paper, and in our granted US and UK patents, we explained that if a video contains a label as metadata, then on digital devices, the video could be automatically filtered away from children who would be too young to view it. The content, however, remains available to adults and children who who are old enough not to be harmed by it. We called our labels the SafeCast head codes. In December 2016, we explained our SafeCast head codes to a couple of senior civil servants at the DCMS who were advising the ministers Karen Bradley and Matthew Hancock on the implementation of an internet safety strategy for children and vulnerable adults. We explained to them that in order to enable our labelling system to become a global standard without incurring a cost overhead, the board of SafeCast had decided that the use of the SafeCast head codes should be free to organisations and to the public at large who create content. The only sector that does incur a cost is advertising, which falls precisely within the scope of the granted SafeCast patents. At our meeting with the civil servants, we were asked to build a demonstrator of what we were proposing and put this on our website. This we did, and we would invite all interested parties to go to our website www.safecast.co.uk and play with it. There are two modes. One is beginner mode and the other one is expert mode, and we have designed both of them to be self-explanatory. The demonstrator works through a Google form. It simulates the process of uploading a video to YouTube, Flickr or Vimeo, and asks you some questions about your video so that the correct SafeCast head code is assigned to label it. Using short clips from various broadcast television programs and films, we indicate the various levels of sex, violence and horror to be applied to the content. Users will just select a level code, which is then embedded as metadata within their video. And if a user already knows the SafeCast head codes, then the expert mode will allow the user to embed the correct level code with just one click. After showing our demonstrator to the civil servants at the DCMS, we then took it to a UK organisation called the Digital Production Partnership. The Digital Production Partnership is a company that is jointly owned by the BBC, ITV and Channel 4. It specifies technical standards and it publishes a metadata standard specification which sets out what hidden data needs to be embedded in a video so that it is appropriately managed by all UK broadcasters' systems. We showed our proposals to the DPP, who said that what we had come up with could be a global standard. It directed us towards a US organisation called IDA, the Entertainment Identifier Registry Association. IDA was established in 2010. It is an American organisation whose members include Google, Microsoft, Disney and Sony. ITV in the UK is a member of IDA. So SafeCast is currently pursuing the establishment of its head codes as an alternative ID system within IDA. This will effectively mean that SafeCast head codes would become a global standard that everyone can use. Protecting children from seeing inappropriate content on the internet is a global problem. Probably the most important legislation in this area is the US Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA. COPPA is enforced by the Federal Trade Commission in the USA. COPPA bans the collection of data on children under 13 unless their parents have been notified and have agreed to the collection on behalf of their child. It has meant that until very recently, US companies like Google and Facebook have banned anyone under the age of 13 from having a Google or Facebook account. In the UK, this ban hasn't worked very well. 3 years ago, the online safety advisory website, Know the Net, found that 52% of 8 to 16-year-olds had ignored Facebook's age limit. It found that 59% of children are social networking by 10 years old. The problem was epitomised by the now classic 1993 New Yorker cartoon by Peter Steiner. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. So how can you restrict access to inappropriate age groups when the internet is open to all? America has devoted serious security resources to dealing with this issue, particularly after 9/11. The task of solving it fell to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the NIST, and solve it they did. The NIST is a unit of the US Commerce Department that has active programs for developing standards. It has a budget approaching $1 billion a year to develop its services. In late June 2017, the NIST published a 4-volume special publication on digital identification. It definitively solved the problem of establishing a user's attributes, for example, age, sex, socio-demographics, etc., on the otherwise anonymous internet. It did so by specifying how to establish attributes to various levels of assurance. It thus produced a roadmap which any technology developer could use to build an attribute authentication system. Under the NIST standard, biometric data, such as a fingerprint, when combined with a photograph and a password supposedly known only to the user, can give a level of assurance that is greater than just knowing a password. The NIST publication showed how an attribute authentication system could be relied upon to prove facts about the user to the civil standard, i.e., balance of probabilities, that would be accepted as such in a court of law. This is termed Level of Assurance 2, or LOA 2. A more onerous and comprehensive attribute authentication system could be relied upon to prove facts to the criminal standard of beyond reasonable doubt. This is termed Level of Assurance 3, or LOA 3. One early adopter of the NIST special publication is Google. They have launched Google Family Link in the USA, which works on Android devices, but only those which support Android version 7 or later. This restriction currently excludes most Android devices. Google Family Link is based on their corporate Android for Work service used by major companies. Using it, parents are able to create a locked-down Android device for their child, in a process which establishes the parent as the gatekeeper for their child's device. Parents can see usage time for apps and total time spent looking at a screen. They can set bedtime limits or total usage limits. However, on the child's 13th birthday, all controls evaporate, and the child can remove any or all the controls which a parent may have put on the system. Consequently, as the service currently stands, it would not be suitable for use in the UK and Europe. It's worth noting that Google doesn't have a monopoly in the NIST standard. Apple or Microsoft or IBM or any technology platform could each come up with their own implementation of the NIST standard. Indeed, IBM some time ago came up with a product, their Identity Mixer, which can prove facts about a person's attributes on the internet to both civil and criminal standards. So back to the UK, where the government in the last Parliament passed the Digital Economy Act 2017. Within it, The Act sets out the provisions that are aimed to protect children from seeing inappropriate content on television and the internet. There has been much confusion about these measures, partly arising from a somewhat weird campaign by the Open Rights Group, which totally misrepresented filtering and labelling. The truth is rather different. In February 2017, on the BBC Radio 4 Today programme, there was an horrific piece by Matthew Price on a 9-year-old child viewing a beheading video on the internet. This material should not be available to children. Around the same time, Barnardo's released a report about child-on-child abuse and its extraordinary increase owing to the lack of filtering on tablets and mobile phones for children. Addressing this issue, John Carr, a noted advocate on the safety of children, wrote, "The great majority of social media sites say that 13-year-olds may use their services, but because few, if any, do any kind of age verification, we know that 75% of all 10 to 12-year-olds in the UK are on them." However, on Twitter and Tumblr, for example, there is a phenomenal amount of hardcore porn published by individual account holders. For practical purposes, it can be viewed by anyone. There is no justification for a site that specifies 13 as its minimum age to provide ready access to 18+ material. And if the same site also knows that in fact large numbers of sub-13-year-olds are customers, their position is completely indefensible. We cannot let the Digital Economy Bill pass into law without addressing this. Parliament listened to John Carr. In getting the bill through the House, there was complete unanimity amongst MPs and peers on the need to filter content and for the web behemoths to enforce their minimum age restrictions. The agreed provision finally appeared as Section 104 of the Act. Internet filters. Paragraph 1. A provider of an internet access service to an end user may prevent or restrict access on the service to information, content, applications or services for child protection or other purposes, if the action is in accordance with the terms on which the end user uses the service. This phrasing, that uses the term may rather than must, gives the impression that adherence to its provisions is optional. However, it needs to be read in its true context. First, a bit of history. In 2003, when Ofcom was set up under the Communications Act 2003, it was given certain overarching powers to ensure that UK commercial television and radio, telecommunications networks, wireless and satellite services operate, compete and develop in the greater public interest. This means that the UK has the best regulated broadcasting services anywhere in the world. Section 3 of the Communications Act 2003 gives Ofcom immense power and today needs to be read in conjunction with Section 104 of the Digital Economy Act 2017, which Parliament has just passed into law. If Google or Facebook or Twitter or anyone else purports to ignore the need to filter content so as to protect children in accordance with the end user agreements they say that they adhere to, then it is open to Ofcom to find, on reasonable grounds, that the organisation is not offering internet access services in accordance with the fundamental Communications Act provisions. These include, under Section 3, subsection 4 and subsection H, the provision of, quote, complying with the vulnerability of children and of others, whose circumstances appear to Ofcom to put them in need of special protection. Of course, we're not suggesting that Ofcom would be likely to pull the plug on Google, Facebook, or Twitter. If, however, over the next few months, Ofcom does not see progress in filtering content so as to protect British children, then enhanced regulation could well be promulgated, possibly by statutory instrument. So how could Google, Facebook, or Twitter filter video content? They'll be able to do so if they adopt and mandate filtering of their video content using the SafeCast headcodes. Use of the SafeCast headcodes should not be a problem for them. Content from UK regulated broadcasters, i.e. the BBC, ITV, Sky, etc., should all arrive pre-labelled once the SafeCast headcodes have become an alt ID in the IDA system. Homemade video content would depend upon the user inserting the appropriate SafeCast headcode when uploading it to a service, for example YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook, etc. If a homemade video creator mislabels the video when uploading it, the mislabeling can quickly be caught and the video reclassified with the appropriate SafeCast headcodes so as to protect children. This would happen either by an early viewer raising a query with the service before it had been widely seen, suggesting that the upload was a misclassification, or by the use of artificial intelligence services, flagging the video for potential misclassification, and this flagging and reclassification being confirmed by a professional reviewer. By using the SafeCast headcodes, a further level of protection can be embodied within both television and internet systems. Advertisements for products and services which children should not view can also be labelled and filtered away from them. Adverts for prescription medicines and alcohol, which cannot be shown before the 9 p.m. watershed on television, can be automatically filtered away from children's content on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. The same middleware software in the mobile device will be able to remove this whilst removing other unacceptable video content. Recent parliamentary committee room debates have indicated a willingness for enhanced protection for children against the advertising of high sugar products. A wave of child obesity is causing concerns in the NHS. Gambling addiction amongst young people is a perceived problem. The government is currently undertaking an urgent review of fixed odds betting terminals in high street premises. Enhanced regulation of adverts targeting children and vulnerable people is likely to be demanded by Parliament. And SafeCast, with its headcode system, can give Parliament the tools to protect everyone.